time for the Writer's Block, our weekly look at sports, and more sports. I'm Jenni Carlson here in the studios of the Oklahoman, joined by my good friend Cedric Golden in the studio of the Austin American-Statesman. Hello, friend.
What's up, J. Carr?
Hey, it's a lot of football, but we're going to talk some basketball too if people hang on with us.
Okay.
We'll get to that eventually, but let's start with this, Cedric. First rankings of the College Football Playoff Committee out this week. You know, we still have the AP poll, we still have the coaches poll, but in reality, it's not till these folks start to rank that we really get a sense of where teams are. Were there surprises from your perspective, either with how the Big 12 fared or where teams were ranked? What were your initial thoughts about the rankings?
I thought the rankings were okay. I noticed that Kansas State was in there at like 16, and they've got two double-digit losses. So I don't know about all of that, but I guess beating Oklahoma carries a lot of weight. Not any surprises up top. Ohio State is the best team in the country, the most complete team in the country. Justin Fields is a Heisman Trophy candidate. J.K. Dobbins, who's from down in this area, one of the best running backs in the country. And Chase Young, the Ohio State defensive end, to me, is the best player in the game today.
Yeah.
And if Texas had Chase Young, Texas wouldn't be struggling. That's the biggest problem is they don't have a pass rush. So LSU, Alabama, Clemson, usual suspects. I'll be interested to see what happens in Game of the Millennium this weekend. LSU, Alabama. I think the loser of that game will not make the CFP.
Yeah, lots of teams in the top, say, 8 or so that are going to have to play somebody else in that vicinity. You know, Clemson is obviously the outlier. The ACC just not good at all. They're fifth right now at 9-0, behind, as you mentioned, Cedric, Ohio State at 1, LSU, Alabama, then Penn State. Penn State has a big game this weekend, going up against a surprisingly undefeated Minnesota team. Now, they're down the rankings a little bit. Let's see where they fell. They don't come in until 17, even at 8-0, behind a previously mentioned K-State team at 6-2. Some other teams with multiple losses, so their strength of schedule not good. But, you know, the question will become, Cedric, in my mind, as we look at this, you know, with all these SEC teams up towards the top, not only 2 and 3, but then you look at Georgia at 6, Florida's at 10, Auburn's at 11. You know, as these teams in the SEC start to play each other at the end, and then obviously the SEC championship game, you know, is a Clemson or even say an Oklahoma with their one loss, even if they run the table, win the Big 12, you know, are they going to be able to have the strength of schedule in the wins that they have to overtake some of these SEC teams, even if they have a loss, because you are going to have some of that shaking out of, you know, who wins LSU, Alabama, who beats who in the SEC championship game. It's going to be a really big question, and, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 SEC teams make it this year because you do have, you know, such a problem with, say, ACC strength. Even Pac-12 is really top-heavy, Oregon and Utah being in the top 10, but really not a whole lot else. So, you know, can an undefeated the rest of the way Oklahoma get in the playoff? Can an undefeated potentially Baylor get in the playoff? Cedric, those are questions I think people in our neck of the woods are wondering about. And how does the Big 12 look in this whole thing?
Well, an undefeated Baylor would have to beat OU to get in. So twice.
Probably,
Jen.
Yeah.
And so, let's keep it real. OU's going to the Big 12 championship game. They just are. The question is, will it be Baylor? Will it be Texas? Will it be K-State? Somebody like that. So to me, I think that kind of question will answer itself eventually. There may be a one-loss SEC team in there. I believe Clemson's going to figure out a way to get in because the ACC is horrible. And you can't tell me a defending national champion that runs the table isn't going to get in. So I think Clemson's in. I think Ohio State is going to be good enough to get in. And I think it's going to be LSU or Alabama in, and perhaps Georgia. But Georgia doesn't get in unless Georgia wins the SEC. Georgia already has a loss. and I think it was the South Carolina,
Yeah.
which won't look good to the committee. So
No.
there are a lot of teams that are jumbled in there with a chance to make it, but there's little wiggle room for those teams with one loss.
Yeah, and you think about what the committee would have to, see or not see potentially if, say, Clemson goes undefeated, if a Penn State or Minnesota goes undefeated, and in the Big Ten, obviously they're playing each other, but then Big 12 or the Big Ten championship game. So it's really, it would seem odd if multiple undefeated teams are there at the end of the year. Could a couple of those be left out? It just doesn't seem like that's going to be the situation. Their wins, I don't think they're going to have a ton of great wins. Clemson isn't, it doesn't look like. The Big Ten, maybe it'll shake out a little bit better for them. But, the Big 12 is interesting, Cedric, because, with Oklahoma and Baylor, Oklahoma State, a team with 3 losses that, had some really ugly losses included in that. They come in at 23. So the committee is looking at who have you beaten, and yes, losses are a detriment to you, but if you've beaten some good teams, Oklahoma State having a win against K-State out there, TCU now, that gets them into the top 25 over, say, an SMU at 8-1 or Navy at 8-1. So they're the first 3 loss, they're the only 3-loss team in the entire top 25. So that says that the committee, sees some good teams in the Big 12, and that could ultimately help get a Baylor and Oklahoma into the playoff. Yeah, I think they're going to have a lot of other teams lose, but, Baylor, if they don't get in, Cedric, if they go undefeated and beat Oklahoma twice in the process, I think they're in. But if they don't, they have always scheduled really, really bad non-conference teams. They may fall victim to their own non-conference scheduling if they don't get in with an undefeated record.
That could happen. But I'm going to tell you, if Baylor runs the table and beats the Sooners twice,
right,
and the Sooners end up with just 2 losses, both to Baylor, Baylor's getting in. They're just going to get in. That's going to be spectacular. Given their resume, having running the table will mean they won at Oklahoma State. They won at K-State. Those teams are ranked, Jen.
Yeah.
And if they beat Oklahoma twice and Texas,
yeah,
then Baylor's getting in.
Yeah.
And if they don't, there should be a federal inquiry. Baylor will get in with a 13-0 record. Baylor will get into the CFP.
Yeah, after being left out a couple years back, I think a lot of people that TCU Baylor question, a lot of people still remember that. I think that Baylor would, but a lot of teams in the running right now. Obviously, those first rankings, very interesting to start to try to get some insights on the committee. But like you said, big games this weekend: LSU, Alabama, Minnesota, Penn State. It'll be continue to be big games as a lot of these teams start to play each other here at the end of the year.